My name is Maribel Crane. I am 27 years old and my life shattered at Christmas dinner. One moment the room was glowing with warmth and laughter. The next my dad's voice cut through everything. The $500,000 I sent you, what did you do with it? My spoon slipped from my hand, cranberry sauce splattering across the plate. The room froze, and I could hear nothing but the pounding of my own heart. 500,000! I stared at him as my sister went pale and my mother suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. The silence was suffocating, and in that moment I realized this wasn't a mistake. In that instant I saw the look they shared. Panic. The kind of panic that only comes when a secret is about to explode. To understand how everything unfolded, let me take you back to that same Christmas dinner in our Cincinnati home. The dining room looked just as I remembered from childhood holidays. Twinkling lights reflected off the polished mahogany table that had hosted decades of family celebrations. The wallpaper had faded slightly after so many years, but the room still carried that familiar blend of roasted beef, cinnamon from the apple pie, Yule log and pine from the massive Christmas tree Dad insisted on cutting down himself every year. My father, Clive, 62 and recently retired from his construction business, sat at the head of the table looking relaxed in his favorite burgundy sweater. His hands were weathered from decades of building homes, but tonight they were wrapped around a wine glass, his posture comfortable. He'd always been a man who believed in hard work and earning your way. My mother, Delora, 58, and a retired elementary school teacher, bustled around serving seconds of her famous stuffing. She had always been the heart of holiday gatherings, but tonight there was something frantic in her movements, like her smile stretched too wide, her laugh too loud. My younger sister, Kendra, 25, sat across from me, picking at her food while scrolling through her phone. She had always been distracted chasing projects that never seemed to pan out, hopping between jobs she never liked, trying to brand herself as some kind of freelancer. Her long, manicured nails tapped rhythmically on the screen as she barely acknowledged the conversation. I was telling them about a challenging client campaign when I shifted to talking about my fashion dreams. I'd been sketching designs in my spare time, modern evening wear and casual pieces with unique cuts. The $15,000 I had managed to save from my job wasn't much, but it was mine, a symbol of independence and persistence. As I spoke, I noticed Dad's expression shift. He set down his fork slowly, deliberately. His blue eyes, usually gentle, sharpened in a way that made my stomach tighten. His words from moments earlier still echoed in the room, heavy and impossible to ignore. 500,000 what? I don't understand what you're talking about. Across the table, Kendra's face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she gripped her water glass. She kept her eyes glued to the table, refusing to meet mine. Mom suddenly became very interested in gathering empty dishes, her movements sharp and hurried. Dad leaned forward, his brow furrowing. Last June, I set up a separate account for you with $500,000. It was meant for your future, for that business you're always talking about, or for whatever else you wanted to build with your life. I shook my head so hard my earrings jingled. Dad, I swear I've never received any money like that. The only savings I have is the $15,000 from work. I would definitely remember $500,000. The warmth that had filled the room moments earlier evaporated. I could feel the silence pressing down on us. Kendra shifted in her seat, her knuckles white as she clutched her glass. Finally, her voice higher and shakier than usual broke through. Dad, maybe there was some kind of bank error or something? You know how these things can get mixed up sometimes. But Dad didn't look convinced. His jaw set in that stubborn way I remembered from childhood. There's no error, Kendra. I have all the paperwork. The question is why Maribel doesn't know about money that belongs to her. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. None of this made sense. $500,000. With my name on it, my mind raced through possibilities. Has something been lost in the mail? Was there some mistake, or had someone stolen my identity? But then I looked at the way Mom's hands shook as she clutched her dish towel, how her eyes darted to the floor instead of meeting mine, the way Kendra hunched over, shrinking into herself. And I knew deep down that this wasn't a random mistake. My stomach churned violently. Suddenly, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed began slotting together. Kendra's new clothes, the designer handbags, the way she had been vague about her freelance projects, Mom's jittery energy tonight, which I'd chalked up to holiday hosting stress. Dad, I managed. Though my voice trembled, I needed to see the papers you're talking about. Because I promise you, I've never seen or heard about any $500,000 account. If money was set aside for me, someone else would have been accessing it. The words came out firmer than I felt inside. My insides quaked with dread, but I couldn't let them see me falter. I had to know the truth, no matter how terrifying it was to suspect it lived under my own roof. Dad's face hardened, then he gave a curt nod. Fine. Let's go to my office right now and figure this out. Because if someone has been taking money that belongs to you, we're going to find out who and we're going to fix it. Chairs scraped against the floor as everyone rose. Mom set down the stack of dishes with a clatter that made me flinch. My legs felt like they were moving through cement as I followed Dad toward the hall, and then I caught it. The look that passed between Mom and Kendra. It lasted only a heartbeat, but it was unmistakable. Their eyes met wide and frantic, a flash of pure panic. The kind of look people share when their secret is seconds from being exposed. My chest tightened painfully. Whatever truth waited in Dad's office, it wasn't going to be a simple misunderstanding. It was going to rip apart everything I thought I knew about my family. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 12, my mind racing through every detail of dinner. The look between Mom and Kendra played on repeat. The way Dad's face had hardened when he mentioned the money. The papers he'd pulled from his office were safe, showing my name on an account I'd never opened. $500,000. The number felt impossible, like trying to hold water in my hands. I'd always trusted my family completely. Dad had built his construction business from nothing, teaching me that honesty and hard work were the only currencies that mattered. Mom had spent 30 years shaping young minds, preaching integrity to every student who walked through her classroom door. But something was very wrong here, and I could feel it in my bones. The next morning I called my boss and used some vacation days. I couldn't leave Cincinnati until I understood what was happening. Mom was already bustling around the kitchen when I came downstairs, her movements still carrying that nervous energy from the night before. "Everything is okay, sweetheart. You look tired." "I'm fine, Mom. Just thinking about what Dad showed us last night." Her hands stilled on the coffee pot for just a moment. "Oh, that bank situation. I'm sure it'll all work out. These things usually do." But I noticed she wouldn't meet my eyes. Kendra wandered in around 10, looking effortlessly put together in a way that struck me as odd. Her camel-colored coat was definitely Burberry. The handbag slung over her shoulder was Coach, the kind that cost more than my monthly rent. Her shoes were unmistakably Louboutin, the red soles catching the morning light. When my chronically broke sister started wearing designer everything. "Hey, Ken," I said casually, pouring myself coffee. "That's a gorgeous coat, new." She glanced down at it like she'd forgotten what she was wearing. "Oh, this old thing, I've had it forever." But I knew that wasn't true. I'd been home for Thanksgiving just 6 weeks ago, and Kendra had been wearing her usual thrift store finds, complaining about how freelance work was barely paying her bills. "So how's work going? Dad mentioned last night that you've been doing well." Kendra's response was immediate but vague. "Yeah, I've had some really good projects lately. Big clients, you know. Social media campaigns, website design, that kind of stuff. That's amazing." "What companies?" Her pause was just a beat too long. "Oh, mostly local businesses. Nothing you'd know. Small stuff, but they pay well." I watched her fidget with her phone, avoiding eye contact. In all our years growing up together, I'd learned to read Kendra's tells. She was lying. After she left for what she called a client meeting, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I called Aunt Seraphine, Dad's sister, who owned a successful bakery downtown. Seraphine had always been the family's unofficial information network, the kind of person who noticed everything and forgot nothing. "Hey, Aunt Sarah, it's Maribel. Do you have a few minutes to chat?" "Of course, honey. How was Christmas dinner last night? Interesting. Actually, I wanted to ask you about Kendra. Have you noticed anything different about her lately?" There was a long pause. "Funny you should ask. I've been wondering about that girl for weeks now. Last Tuesday, I saw her driving a brand new Audi. Stopped right in front of Hartwell Jewelers, you know, that expensive place on Vine Street. I figured maybe she'd found herself a rich boyfriend, but your mother mentioned she's still single." My stomach dropped. A new Audi. Hartwell Jewelers was where Cincinnati's elite shopped for engagement rings and anniversary gifts. "Did you see her go into the jewelry store?" "Sure did. I stayed there for almost an hour. Came out with one of their fancy little bags. I thanked Seraphine and hung up my hands, shaking slightly. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. That afternoon, I followed Kendra. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there had to be a reasonable explanation for everything. But when she pulled up to Saks Fifth Avenue in a gleaming silver Audi A4, my paranoia started feeling more like intuition. I watched from across the street as she walked into the store like she owned it. No hesitation, no checking prices, no careful budgeting that I'd seen her do her entire adult life. 45 minutes later, she emerged with several shopping bags and the confident stride of someone who'd just spent money without a care in the world. I followed her into a high-end boutique next. Through the window, I watched her select a dress, barely glancing at the price tag before handing over what looked like a credit card. The saleswoman treated her like a valued customer, the kind of deference reserved for people who spent serious money. The dress she bought cost $800. I saw the receipt when she walked past the window. $800 for a single dress, paid without hesitation by someone who'd been eating ramen noodles and complaining about electricity bills just months ago. That evening, I positioned myself in the hallway outside the kitchen, pretending to read while Mom and Kendra cleaned up dinner. Their voices were low, but the house's old acoustics carried sound better than they realized. "You need to be more careful," Mom was saying. "Maribel's starting to notice things." "I know, but I need more time to figure this out. I can't just make it all disappear overnight." My heart pounded so hard I was sure they could hear it. They were talking about me. They were talking about hiding something from me. What if she starts asking more questions? What if she wants to see bank statements? Then we told her what we agreed on, that it's complicated that we're handling it. She trusts us, Kendra. She always has. But for how long? Dad's not going to let this go. Then you better figure something out quickly. I crept back to my room, my mind reeling. They were definitely hiding something about the money. The money that was supposed to be mine, the money I'd never seen. As I lay in bed that second sleepless night, I thought about everything I'd observed. Kendra's designer clothes, her new car, her cavalier spending at expensive stores, Mom's nervous energy and evasive answers, the way they'd both panicked when Dad brought up the account. $500,000. Enough to buy a car, a wardrobe, jewelry, and still have plenty left over. I pulled out my phone and started searching for financial lawyers in Columbus. Whatever was happening here, I had a terrible feeling that my own family was stealing from me, and I was going to need professional help to prove it. The next morning, I knew I needed professional help. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Jonas Vey, a college friend who'd become a financial lawyer in Columbus. We'd dated briefly senior year, but had managed to stay friends after things didn't work out romantically. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was Jonas. "Mari, hey, it's been forever. How are you?" His voice was warm, familiar. I almost broke down right there on the phone. "Jonas, I need your help. I think someone in my family has been stealing money from me. A lot of money." There was a pause. "Okay, slow down. Tell me everything." I explained about the Christmas dinner revelation, the mysterious $500,000 account, and everything I'd observed about Kendra's sudden wealth. Jonas listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Mari, if someone's been accessing an account illegally, they'll have left a digital trail. You need to check all your email, text messages from banks and request detailed statements from your father's bank. Every transaction, every login, every communication. That makes sense. But what if they covered their tracks? They can try. But banks are required to keep extensive records. If your sister opened an account using your information, there will be documentation. The question is whether she forged your signature or somehow got you to sign something without realizing what it was." "I know I never signed anything." "I'm certain of that. Then we're looking at identity theft and forgery. That's serious federal crime territory." After hanging up with Jonas, I approached Dad in his home office. He was sitting at his desk, staring at the bank papers from the night before, his face etched with confusion and anger. "Dad, I need to see everything. Every document, every statement, every piece of paper related to this account." He looked up at me with tired eyes. "Of course, sweetheart. I've been going through it all morning trying to make sense of it." We spread the documents across his large oak desk. The account had indeed been opened in June, supposedly as a joint account between Kendra and me. My name was clearly listed as a co-owner with full access rights. "But Dad, I swear to you, I never signed any of these papers." He picked up the signature page and held it under his desk lamp. "Look at this closely. Does this look like your signature?" I studied handwriting. It was close, but there was something off about it. The loops were too careful, the pressure too even. It looked like someone had practiced writing my name but couldn't quite capture the natural flow of my actual signature. "This isn't mine. It's similar, but it's not how I write. See how the M in Maribel curves? I always make that sharper. And the tail on the C in Crane is too long." Dad's jaw tightened. "Someone forged your signature." The more we dug into the documents, the clearer the deception became. According to the bank's records, both Kendra and I had appeared together to open the account. But I had been working in Columbus that day, something I could easily prove with my office calendar. I called the bank and requested an emergency meeting. Dad and I drove to First National Bank downtown where Mr. Harrison, the branch manager, agreed to see us immediately. "Mr. Crane, I remember this account opening. Your daughter seemed very excited about the business venture they were planning together, but I wasn't there, I said firmly. I was in Columbus that day at work. I can provide documentation, Mr. Harrison's expression grew troubled. But we have clear records that both sisters were present. Let me pull up our security footage from that day. We waited in his office while he accessed the bank's digital archive. When he returned, his face was pale. I need to show you this. He turned his computer screen toward us. The security footage was crystal clear. I watched Kendra walk into the bank alone, carrying 2 sets of identification and paperwork. She approached the teller's window, had a brief conversation, then was escorted to a private office where she spent nearly an hour. There's only one person on this footage, Mr. Harrison said quietly. Your daughter Kendra came in by herself with identification for both sisters. My heart pounded. She had somehow obtained copies of my personal documents and used them to impersonate me. This is identity theft, I said, my voice shaking. She stole my personal information and opened an account in my name without my knowledge or consent. Mr. Harrison nodded gravely. I'm afraid you're right. We'll need to freeze this account immediately and report this to the authorities. I'm very sorry, Miss Crane. Our verification procedures should have caught this. Dad was quiet during the drive home, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. I called Jonas and updated him on what we'd discovered. Mari, this is even worse than I thought. Not only did she forge your signature, but she obtained copies of your personal documents and used them to impersonate you at the bank. That's multiple felonies. There's more, I said. Can you help me check my email and phone records? My lawyer friend mentioned something about digital trails. Jonas walked me through accessing my email security settings and phone account online. What we discovered made my blood run cold. Starting in May, someone had set up email forwarding rules on my account. Any messages containing keywords like bank account statement or transaction were automatically forwarded to a secondary email address and then deleted from my inbox. They also found evidence of call forwarding on my phone. During specific hours, usually when I was at work, calls from the bank's customer service number were redirected to a different phone. This is incredibly sophisticated, Jonas said over video call as we reviewed the evidence together. Kendra didn't just steal your money. She created an entire system to ensure you'd never find out about it. Every bank notification, every security alert, every attempt by the bank to contact you was intercepted. I felt sick. My own sister had violated my privacy so completely, so methodically. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a desperate mistake. This was a calculated, long-term deception. Jonas? What do I do now? You report this to the police immediately. This is criminal identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. With the evidence you've gathered, they'll have a strong case. But she's my sister, Mari. She stole $500,000 from you and went to extraordinary lengths to cover it up. This isn't about family anymore. This is about serious crimes that need to be prosecuted. As I sat in Dad's office that evening, surrounded by bank statements and legal documents, I realized that the sister I thought I knew didn't exist. The real Kendra was someone who could systematically steal from her own family, while looking me in the eye every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering, and lie without hesitation. The woman wearing designer clothes and driving a luxury car had built her new life on money that belonged to me. And now I had to decide whether I was brave enough to pursue justice, even if it meant destroying what was left of my family. With the digital evidence building my case, I knew I needed to find physical proof of where the money had gone. The next morning, when Kendra left for another mysterious client meeting, I made my decision. I was going to search her room. My hands shook as I turned the doorknob to her bedroom. This felt like such a violation, but she had violated me first in ways I was only beginning to understand. The room looked like it always had, with her unmade bed and clothes scattered around. But now I noticed details that had escaped me before. Designer shopping bags were stacked in her closet. Nordstrom Saks Fifth Avenue Tiffany & Co. I pulled them out and found she'd kept the receipts inside, probably for warranty purposes. My stomach dropped as I calculated the totals. A Prada handbag for $3,200. A Cartier watch for $8,000. Louboutin shoes, multiple pairs at $700 each. I photographed everything with my phone, my heart pounding every time I heard a sound from downstairs. The receipts spanned 6 months from July through December. The total was staggering. Nearly $200,000 spent on luxury items alone. But that wasn't the worst of it. Hidden in her desk drawer, I found documents that made me physically sick. Property purchase papers for a small house in Cleveland. Bought for cash in August. $180,000 paid in full. The buyer's name was Kendra Crane. Next to that was the title paperwork for her Audi A4. $45,000 also paid in cash. I sat on her bed trying to process the numbers, the shopping, the house, the car. That was over $400,000 right there. Where was the rest? That's when I found the emails. Printed out and tucked inside a folder were correspondence between Kendra and someone named Evan Hollis. The email address showed he worked for a tech startup in Columbus. I read through the exchange with growing horror. Kendra had pitched him a business partnership, a high-end handmade fashion line with an established customer base and proven revenue streams. She'd sent him detailed financial projections, market analysis, and a professional-looking business plan. None of it was real. The customers didn't exist, the revenue was fabricated. The business plan was fiction. But Evan had believed it all and invested $50,000 into her fake company. My sister wasn't just stealing from family. She was running investment scams on strangers. The most devastating discovery was at the bottom of the drawer. Photocopies of my driver's license, social security card, and passport. And underneath those, practice sheets where Kendra had written my signature over and over, refining her forgery until it looked convincing enough to fool a bank teller. Some of the practice sheets had notes in her handwriting. Make the M more curved. The C needs a longer tail. She had studied my signature like it was homework, perfecting her crime. I photographed everything, my hands trembling with rage and heartbreak. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated, methodical theft that had been planned for months. When I heard Mom come home from her grocery shopping, I made my decision. I gathered all the evidence and went downstairs to confront her. Mom was in the kitchen unpacking bags when I walked in and spread the documents across the counter. Her face went white when she saw what I'd found. Mom, did you know that Kendra used my personal information to open that bank account? She glanced at the papers, then quickly looked away. Honey, I don't know anything about banking procedures, but I wasn't letting her deflect this time. I picked up the photocopies of my identification. These are copies of my driver's license and social security card. They were in Kendra's room, along with practice sheets where she learned to forge my signature. Did you help her make these copies? Mom's shoulders sagged. She clutched the edge of the counter, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. Maribel, please understand. Kendra needed help. She struggled so much financially, and when she told me about this business opportunity, I thought maybe this was her chance to finally succeed. You knew she was stealing from me. The tears started flowing then. She wasn't stealing, she was borrowing. She promised me she'd pay it back with interest once her business took off. I thought I was helping both my daughters. I held up the receipt for the Cleveland house. Borrowing. She bought a house with my money, Mom. She bought a car. She spent $200,000 on clothes and jewelry. How exactly was she planning to pay that back? Mom looked at the receipts like she was seeing them for the first time. I had no idea she'd spent so much. She told me she was making investments, buying equipment for her business. Did you help her copy my documents? The question hung in the air between us. Mom wiped her eyes with her sleeve, and when she looked at me, I saw guilt and shame written across her face. She said she needed them for the business loan application. She said you'd given permission but were too busy with work to handle the paperwork yourself. I believed her. You helped your daughter steal my identity. I thought I was helping her get a legitimate business loan. I never meant for this to happen. But even as she said it, I could see in her eyes that she'd known, at least partially, that what they were doing was wrong. Maybe she'd convinced herself it was temporary, that Kendra would somehow make it right, but she'd helped anyway. I gathered up all the documents, my hands still shaking with anger and betrayal. Mom, you and Kendra didn't just take money from me. You stole my identity, violated my privacy, and lied to my face for months. This isn't about helping the family. This is about committing serious crimes. Where are you going to call the police? This ends now. As I walked toward Dad's office to make the call, I heard Mom crying behind me, but I couldn't let her tears change my mind. This had gone far beyond family disputes or misunderstandings. This was identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy, and both my mother and sister were going to have to face the consequences of what they'd done. I waited until Kendra returned from her so-called client meeting that evening. Dad was in his office going over the bank documents again, and Mom was washing dishes with unusual intensity, her movements sharp and nervous. When I heard Kendra's key in the door, I knew it was time. Family meeting. Living room, now. My voice carried an authority I'd never used with them before. Kendra looked startled. Mom dried her hands slowly, and Dad emerged from his office with a grim expression. We all gathered in the living room where we'd opened Christmas presents just days ago. The tree lights twinkled cheerfully, a stark contrast to the tension filling the space. I had spent the afternoon organizing all the evidence methodically. Bank statements, receipts, property documents, the emails with Evan, and most damning of all, the photocopies of my identification and Kendra's signature practice sheets. I laid them out on the coffee table like a prosecutor presenting a case. I found out what happened to the money. Dad leaned forward studying the documents. Mom perched on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. Kendra stayed standing by the doorway as if she might bolt at any moment. I picked up the Cleveland property deed first. Kendra bought a house in August for $180,000, cash. Then I held up the car title. A new Audi for $45,000, also cash. Kendra's face crumpled, but she didn't speak. I continued spreading out the shopping receipts. $200,000 in luxury purchases over 6 months. Handbags, jewelry, clothes, shoes, and then there's this. I placed the emails with Evan on top of the pile. Kendra created a fake business plan and scammed a local entrepreneur out of $50,000. She told him she was starting a fashion line with proven revenue streams and established customers. None of it was real. Dad's hands shook as he picked up the property deed. His voice was barely controlled. Kendra, what have you done? These are major crimes. Kendra finally broke down, tears streaming down her face. But even through her sobs, she tried to minimize what she'd done. I was going to pay it all back. I just needed time for the business to take off. Evan's investment was going to help me multiply the money and return everything with interest. I stared at her in disbelief. What business, Kendra? The fake fashion line you made up to defraud Evan? Or the luxury lifestyle you've been funding with stolen money? Dad stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. You forged your sister's signature. You stole her identity. This isn't a family dispute anymore, Kendra. These are federal crimes. That's when Mom finally broke down completely. Her voice came out in a rush as if a dam had burst. I helped her. I helped Kendra photocopy Maribel's driver's license and social security card. I helped her practice writing the signature. I thought it was just temporary, just until she could get her business started. The room went silent except for Mom's crying. Dad turned to stare at his wife, his expression one of complete shock. You knew about this? You helped her steal from our daughter. Mom nodded miserably. Kendra said Maribel had given permission but was too busy to handle the paperwork. She said it was a business loan that she'd pay it back with interest. I thought I was helping both my girls. I felt like I might be sick. My own mother had actively participated in identity theft against me. Temporary. I repeated the word with bitter disbelief. Mom, you watched Kendra spend $200,000 on shopping sprees and said nothing. You helped cover up identity theft for 8 months. How is any of that temporary? Kendra made one last desperate attempt at manipulation. She looked directly at me, her eyes red and pleading. Mari, you have a stable career. You're successful. I needed an opportunity to prove myself. You'll never even miss $500,000 with your income potential. That statement cut deeper than anything else she'd said. I stood up, my voice shaking with rage. That wasn't your decision to make, Kendra. That was my money, my trust fund from Dad, my future. You didn't just steal money from me. You stole my trust, you stole my identity. You stole 8 months of my life while I had no idea I was a victim of a crime. Dad looked at Mom and Kendra with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete disgust and disappointment. You both betrayed Maribel and you betrayed me. I worked my entire life to provide for this family, to give my daughters opportunities, and you used that against us. I cannot continue living with people capable of this level of deception. I pulled out my phone and started dialing Jonas's number. What are you doing? Mom asked, panic in her voice. I'm calling my lawyer, and then I'm calling the police. This is way beyond a family matter now. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. Kendra needs to face the legal consequences of what she's done. Kendra fell to her knees, sobbing. Mari, please, I'm your sister. Don't destroy our family over this. But I kept dialing. You destroyed our family the moment you decided to steal from me. You've been lying to my face for 8 months, while spending my money on luxury items and fake business schemes. I trusted you completely, and you violated that trust in the worst possible way. Dad stood beside me, his jaw set with determination. You're doing the right thing, sweetheart. What they did was criminal, and they need to be held accountable. As Jonas's phone began to ring, I looked around the living room one last time. The Christmas tree, the family photos on the mantel, all the memories of what I thought was a loving, honest family. But that family had been an illusion. The real family included a mother who would help one daughter steal from another, and a sister who could systematically commit identity theft while looking me in the eye every holiday and lying without hesitation. Jonas answered on the 3rd ring, and I took a deep breath before speaking. Jonas, it's Maribel. I need you to come to Cincinnati tonight, and I need you to help me file a police report. I have all the evidence we need to press charges for identity theft and fraud. Behind me, Mom was still crying and Kendra was begging, but I had made my decision. Justice mattered more than keeping the peace, and I wasn't going to let them get away with destroying my financial future and violating my trust just because we shared the same last name. Jonas arrived at the house 2 hours later with Detective Mason Dreer from the Cincinnati Police Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Dreer was a tall, serious man in his 40s who carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen every kind of white-collar crime imaginable. When I showed him the evidence I'd compiled, his expression grew increasingly grim. Ms. Crane, with what you've provided here, we have probable cause for multiple felony charges: identity theft, forgery, embezzlement, and potentially wire fraud if any of this money crossed state lines through electronic transfers. The detective's words hit me like a physical blow. Felony charges. My sister and mother were about to be arrested for serious crimes. I need to inform both suspects of their rights and place them under arrest. This is a substantial financial crime with clear evidence of premeditation and conspiracy. My hands trembled as I watched Detective Dreer approach Mom and Kendra in the living room. Dad stood beside me, his face ashen but resolute. He'd aged 10 years in the past 3 days. Delora Crane and Kendra Crane, you're under arrest for identity theft and conspiracy to commit fraud. The sight of Detective Dreer handcuffing my mother was surreal. Mom looked so small and fragile as he read her Miranda rights, her face streaked with tears. Kendra had stopped crying and seemed to be in shock, staring straight ahead as the metal cuffs clicked around her wrists. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. I wanted to feel vindicated, but all I felt was hollow. This was my family being torn apart by handcuffs and police procedures. Dad reached over and squeezed my shoulder as we watched the 2 women we loved being escorted to separate police cars. You're doing the right thing, sweetheart. They made their choices. At the police station, Jonas explained what would happen next. The fluorescent lights felt harsh and institutional, nothing like the warm Christmas atmosphere we'd left behind. Mari, Ohio law treats identity theft involving $500,000 as a first-degree felony. Kendra could face up to 11 years in prison plus mandatory restitution. Your mother's charges are somewhat lesser since she was an accessory, but she's still looking at serious time. 11 years. I tried to imagine my sister in prison for over a decade and couldn't process. Detective Dreer began the preliminary interrogations in separate rooms. I watched through one-way glass as he questioned Mom first. She looked tiny in the metal chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mrs. Crane, you've been charged with complicity to identity theft and obstruction of justice. Would you like to tell me your version of events? Mom's voice was barely audible. We just borrowed the money temporarily. Kendra promised she'd pay it back once her business succeeded. I never intended for this to become such a serious situation. The detective leaned forward. You helped your daughter obtain copies of Maribel's personal documents and forge her signature. That's not borrowing, Mrs. Crane. That's identity theft. When they brought Kendra in, she attempted a different strategy. Her tears had dried, and she'd composed herself into the confident persona I'd watched her use when trying to talk her way out of trouble our whole lives. Detective, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my access to that account. My sister and I discussed this business venture months ago. She was aware I might need to access funds for startup costs, but Detective Dreer had dealt with financial criminals before. He placed the bank's security footage on the table, showing Kendra entering alone with 2 sets of identification. Miss Crane, this footage shows you opening an account using your sister's personal information without her present. Your sister was at work in Columbus that day, which we've verified. This isn't a misunderstanding, this is identity theft. When faced with the overwhelming evidence, both Mom and Kendra finally admitted the basic facts. Yes, the account had been opened illegally. Yes, money had been withdrawn without my knowledge. Yes, some purchases had been made, but they refused to provide details about where all the money had gone, clearly hoping to minimize the charges against them. The defendants are obviously trying to control the narrative. Detective Dreer explained to Jonas and me afterward. They'll admit to what we can already prove, but nothing more. The full confession and detailed financial accounting will have to come during formal court proceedings. The charges were filed that evening. Kendra faced identity theft in the 1st degree, forgery in the 5th degree, embezzlement in the 2nd degree, and fraud in the 4th degree. Mom was charged with complicity to identity theft and obstruction of justice. Almost immediately, the asset seizure process began. Kendra's Cleveland house was frozen, her Audi was impounded, and all her bank accounts were locked pending investigation. Deputies would inventory her jewelry and luxury items for potential liquidation. Recovery amounts will be determined after we complete the asset valuation, Jonas explained. But realistically, Mari, you're looking at maybe 50% recovery if you're lucky. A lot of that money was spent on consumables that can't be recovered. The next morning, Detective Dreer contacted Evan Hollis about the fake business investment. Evan immediately cooperated and filed additional fraud charges against Kendra. I trusted her completely because she presented what looked like legitimate business credentials and financial backing, Evan told the detective. She had professional-looking documents, references, even a business plan that seemed thoroughly researched. I never suspected it was all fabricated. When it came time for bail hearings, the amounts were set high. $100,000 for Kendra, $50,000 for Mom. Neither could afford those amounts, which meant they'd remain in custody until their court dates. As Jonas and I left the police station that night, I felt emotionally drained. The woman who had raised me and taught me about honesty was sitting in a jail cell. My sister, who I'd shared secrets and holidays with my entire life, was facing the possibility of over a decade in prison. But they had made their choices. They had systematically violated my trust, stolen my identity, and committed serious crimes. And now they would face the consequences of those choices, regardless of how much it hurt all of us. The family I thought I knew was gone forever, replaced by the harsh reality of criminal charges and legal proceedings. 3 weeks after the arrest, we sat in Hamilton County Criminal Court for the formal hearing. The courtroom felt imposing with its dark wood paneling and high ceilings, nothing like the cozy family home where this nightmare had begun. I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, with Dad beside me and Jonas on my other side. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Rodriguez, had spent weeks building an airtight case from all the evidence I'd gathered. Bank records, security footage, receipts, emails, forged documents. Everything was organized into thick binders that told the complete story of how my own family had systematically stolen from me. Kendra and Mom sat at the defendant's table with their court-appointed attorneys. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the orange jail uniforms and the weight of what they'd done. Neither would meet my eyes. Your Honor, Ms. Rodriguez began. This case represents one of the most calculated examples of family financial fraud we've seen. The defendants exploited intimate family knowledge to perpetrate identity, theft, and embezzlement over an 8-month period. Kendra's lawyer had advised her to plead guilty to avoid the risk of maximum sentences at trial. When the judge asked for her full confession under oath, the complete scope of her crimes finally came to light. Standing at the defendant's table, Kendra's voice was barely audible as she detailed where every dollar had gone. I used $180,000 to purchase a house in Cleveland, paid in cash, $45,000 for an Audi A4, also cash. Approximately $200,000 on luxury shopping over 8 months, including designer clothing, jewelry, handbags, and travel expenses. The courtroom was silent except for the court reporter's typing. Kendra continued, her voice breaking. I created fake business documents and financial projections to defraud Evan Hollis of $50,000, claiming I was starting a legitimate fashion company. The remaining $25,000 is still in various bank accounts that have now been frozen. When it was Mom's turn to testify, her confession revealed the full extent of her participation. She spoke through tears, but her words were clear and damning. I helped Kendra photocopy Maribel's driver's license, social security card, and passport. I assisted her in practicing Maribel's signature until it looked convincing. I helped set up email forwarding on Maribel's accounts so bank notifications would be redirected and deleted. I actively concealed this theft from my husband for 8 months. The judge leaned forward. Why did you participate in these crimes against your own daughter? Mom's voice cracked. I believed Kendra when she said this was temporary, that she would return the money with interest once her business succeeded. I thought I was giving my younger daughter an opportunity to finally achieve financial stability. Evan Hollis took the stand to describe how thoroughly Kendra had deceived him. He was a soft-spoken man in his early 30s who clearly felt embarrassed about being victimized. Ms. Crane presented what appeared to be a completely legitimate business opportunity. She had detailed financial projections, market analysis, and claimed to have family financial backing for her handmade fashion line. The business plan was professional and convincing. I never suspected any of it was fabricated. After all testimony was heard, the judge delivered the sentences. Kendra received 18 months incarceration, suspended to probation contingent on good behavior, 3 years supervised probation, 400 hours of community service, and complete restitution of $500,000 plus court costs. Mom's sentence was lighter due to her lesser role, 12 months probation, 200 hours community service, and joint liability for the restitution payments. The asset liquidation results were devastating. Kendra's Cleveland house sold quickly for $175,000. Her Audi yielded $38,000 at auction. The jewelry and luxury items she'd accumulated brought in another $25,000. Total recovery was $238,000. Unfortunately, Judge Harrison explained the remaining $262,000 spent on consumables, travel, dining, and experiences cannot be recovered. This represents a permanent loss, less than half. After everything, I would recover less than half of what had been stolen from me. The judge's final remarks captured the gravity of what had happened. Financial crimes against family members represent a particularly egregious breach of trust. These defendants exploited intimate knowledge and family relationships to perpetrate a sophisticated criminal scheme over many months. As we left the courthouse, Dad informed me that he'd already filed for divorce from Mom. After 35 years of marriage, he couldn't continue living with someone who had betrayed their daughter so completely. I keep thinking about all the family dinners where she sat across from you, knowing what she'd helped Kendra do. All the times she asked about your work, your savings, your future plans, while she was actively stealing from you. I can't forgive that level of deception. Gloria Naris, our longtime neighbor, had provided a witness statement describing months of suspicious activity she'd observed. Kendra's sudden acquisition of luxury cars, designer shopping bags, and expensive jewelry had been noticed by more people than she'd realized. The court ordered structured restitution payments. Kendra would pay $400 monthly. Mom would pay $200 monthly until the debt was fully satisfied. At that rate, it would take over 40 years to repay what they owed, assuming they never missed a payment. If they failed to maintain the payment schedule, they would face immediate incarceration. As Jonas drove me back to Columbus that evening, I tried to process what had just happened. Justice had been served, legally speaking. But the family I'd grown up loving was gone forever, replaced by criminal defendants and restitution schedules. The money would never fully come back. The trust could never be rebuilt. And I had to figure out how to move forward with my life, knowing that the people who should have protected me had chosen to destroy me instead. But for the first time since Christmas dinner, I felt like I could breathe. The truth was finally out, consequences had been imposed, and I was free to start rebuilding my life without the weight of lies and deception. 6 months after the court proceedings, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of wallowing in what had been taken from me, I was going to use it as fuel. The $238,000 I'd recovered, combined with my original $15,000 in savings, gave me enough capital to finally pursue my dream of starting a handmade fashion business. Jonas had become more than just my lawyer during those dark months. Our relationship had evolved from professional to personal, built on a foundations of trust that had been tested by the worst possible circumstances. He'd seen me at my most vulnerable and helped me find my strength again. You survived the worst kind of betrayal, Mari. Family, stealing not just your money but your identity, your peace of mind. If you can get through that, you can build anything you want. I rented a small studio space in the Columbus Arts District, a converted warehouse that still smelled faintly of sawdust and old leather. The rent was reasonable, and the neighborhood had an energy that inspired me. Artists, musicians, and small business owners who understood the struggle of turning passion into livelihood. My designs reflected everything I'd been through. Bold lines that refused to apologize, confident colors that demanded attention. Pieces that made women feel powerful and unafraid. I poured my anger, my hurt, and my determination into every stitch, every pattern, every carefully chosen fabric. Leora had remained my closest friend through everything, driving down from Cleveland on weekends to help me set up displays and offering emotional support when the weight of starting over felt overwhelming. You've turned your pain into purpose, Mari. That's a transformation most people never achieve. What happened to you was horrible, but look what you're creating from it. I started small with a basic website and social media presence. I shared my story carefully, focusing on resilience and empowerment rather than dwelling on betrayal. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Women who'd experienced financial abuse, family betrayal, or simply felt beaten down by life connected with both my designs and my journey. My first customers became my biggest advocates. They bought pieces not just because they loved the clothes, but because they believed in what I represented. Someone who'd been knocked down and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. Dad completed his divorce and moved into a modest condo across town. Our relationship had actually grown stronger through the shared trauma. We met for dinner every Sunday, and he never missed an opportunity to tell me how proud he was of my courage. Sweetheart, I failed to protect you from the people who should have loved you most. But I'm so proud of the woman you've become. You took the worst thing that could happen and turned it into something positive. Aunt Seraphine became one of my earliest business supporters, referring customers from her bakery and always asking about my latest designs when I visited. She had a gift for connecting with people, and her endorsement carried weight in our community. I always knew you had an entrepreneurial spirit, honey. This terrible situation just accelerated your timeline. Your mother and sister tried to steal your future, but look at what you've built instead. After 8 months of operation, Maribel Originals reached its break-even point. Monthly revenue hit $12,000, with a growing customer base throughout Ohio and neighboring states. The success felt completely different from anything I might have built with stolen money. Every dollar was earned through honest work creativity and the trust of customers who believed in what I was doing. Local fashion blogger Emma Chen wrote a feature about my business that brought even more attention. Designer turns family betrayal into creative fuel, the headline read. The article generated dozens of new customers and recognition throughout the local fashion community. My first major milestone came when I hired Sarah, a part-time assistant who was recovering from her own financial family trauma. Her ex-husband had emptied their joint accounts and disappeared, leaving her with 2 kids and massive debt. We understood each other's pain in a way that created an instant bond. We support each other's healing through work, I explained to a local newspaper reporter. Building something positive together helps us both move forward from what was done to us. Business stability allowed me to take another big step. Jonas and I moved in together, renting a beautiful apartment in German Village with hardwood floors and big windows that filled my design workspace with natural light. It felt like the fresh start I'd been working toward, built on trust and shared values rather than hidden lies. One evening, as I worked on a new collection while Jonas reviewed legal briefs at the kitchen table, I realized how far I'd come. The business was thriving, my relationship was built on honesty, and I'd created a life that belonged entirely to me. No one can take away what I've earned through my own effort, I told Jonas as I showed him my latest revenue reports. This is mine in a way that inheritance never could have been. He looked up from his papers and smiled. You built this from nothing but determination and talent. Even if they'd never stolen from you, this would still be a remarkable achievement. The woman who'd sat at that Christmas dinner table 10 months ago, naive about her family's capacity for betrayal, felt like a different person. I'd been forced to grow up fast, to learn that trust had to be earned, and that sometimes the people closest to you were capable of unimaginable cruelty. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Strong enough to pursue justice, even when it meant destroying my family. Strong enough to build a business from scratch. Strong enough to love again carefully but deeply. As I looked around our apartment, filled with my designs and our shared dreams, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready for it. 2 years after the court case, I was setting up a display in my small showroom in Cincinnati's Arts District when I saw her. Kendra stood outside the window, looking like a shadow of the confident woman who'd once worn designer clothes and driven a luxury car. Her outfit came from discount stores, her hair needed cutting, and there was a tiredness in her posture that spoke of long hours at minimum wage jobs. She hesitated for several minutes before finally pushing through the door. The bell chimed, and I looked up from arranging a rack of my latest evening wear collection. Mari, I'm sorry to bother you. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I know you probably don't want to see me. I studied my sister carefully. The criminal record had made stable employment nearly impossible. She was working retail at a department store, living in a shared apartment with 2 roommates, scraping together her $400 monthly restitution payments. The consequences of her choices were written in every line of her face. What do you want, Kendra? She took a shaky breath. I wanted to apologize for everything. I know I destroyed our family and hurt you in ways that can never be fixed. Do you actually understand what you did wrong? Not just that you got caught, but why what you did was wrong. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I was selfish and greedy. I thought I deserved success without having to earn it. I convinced myself that you wouldn't miss the money because you had a stable career. I was jealous of everything you'd accomplished through hard work. For a moment I felt a flicker of hope that maybe she truly understood, but then her expression shifted, becoming more calculating. Mari, I'm struggling so much with these restitution payments. Do you think you could help me get a better job? Maybe write me a reference letter or connect me with someone in your business network. I'm barely making ends meet. The familiar manipulation hit me like a slap. Even now, even after everything she was trying to use me, you're still trying to get something from me. You haven't changed at all. You just want an easier path, but you're successful now. You could afford to help your family. It's not like I'm asking for money. I set down the dress I'd been holding and faced her directly. You forfeited the right to call us family when you stole my identity and spent 8 months lying to my face. I built this business to replace what you stole from me. You need to earn your own redemption, not ask me to make your life easier. Kendra's tears turned angry. You're never going to forgive me, are you? No matter what I do. Forgiveness and trust are different things, Kendra. I forgave you for my own peace of mind. But that doesn't mean I'll ever trust you again or help you avoid the consequences of your choices. She left without another word, and I knew it would be the last time I'd see her voluntarily. Mom's attempts at reconciliation proved more persistent and emotionally complicated. The first approach came through Mrs. Patterson, a family friend who'd known us since childhood. Your mother deeply regrets what happened, honey. She misses you terribly and would like to rebuild your relationship. My response was swift and clear. Mom chose to enable Kendra over protecting me. Some decisions have permanent consequences. 3 months later, a handwritten letter arrived at my business address. Mom's familiar script covered 2 pages of careful apologies and explanations. My dearest daughter, I made a terrible mistake. I thought I was helping Kendra succeed, but I realize now that I hurt you in unforgivable ways. Please give me a chance to rebuild our relationship. I love you and I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. I discussed it with Jonas that evening as we cooked dinner together. Part of me misses having a mother. But how do you trust someone who helped steal your identity and lied about it for 8 months? Jonas stirred the pasta thoughtfully. Trust has to be earned back through consistent actions over time. Has she shown any real understanding of why what she did was wrong? I thought about the letter. She kept focusing on her intentions rather than the impact of her actions. That felt like missing the point entirely. 6 months later, Mom showed up at my showroom unannounced. I was working late updating inventory when she appeared at the door looking frail and desperate. Maribel, please. I've lost everything. My marriage, my home, my social standing. All I want is a relationship with my daughter. The confrontation forced me to articulate the boundary I'd been building for 2 years. Mom, you made a choice when you decided to help Kendra steal my identity. You chose her side over honesty, over protecting me, over the values you claim to believe in. You have to live with the consequences of that choice. But I'm your mother. Doesn't that count for something? Being my mother made what you did worse, not better. You had a responsibility to protect me, and instead you helped someone violate me in the most intimate way possible. I watched her face crumple as the finality of my decision sank in. I can forgive you for my own healing, but I cannot and will not restore our relationship. Some betrayals cut too deep for repair. She left crying, and I knew she finally understood that there would be no reconciliation. That night, I sat in my apartment with Jonas, processing the emotional weight of closing the door on my family permanently. Some betrayals cut too deep for repair, I told him. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can let go of my anger without letting them back into my life. You've set healthy boundaries with people who proved they can't be trusted, Jonas replied. That's not cruel, that's self-protection. As I looked around the life I'd built, surrounded by my designs and the evidence of my success, I realized that the family I'd lost had been built on a foundation of lies. Anyway, the real family was what I'd chosen, Jonas, Aunt Seraphine, Leora, even my employees who'd become like sisters to me. They had tried to destroy my future, but I'd built something better from the pieces they'd left behind. 3 years after that devastating Christmas dinner, I stood before the mirror in my bridal suite, wearing a wedding dress I'd designed myself. The ivory silk flowed like water, with hand-beaded details that caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Maribel Originals had grown beyond anything I'd imagined that terrible night when my world fell apart. We now had a flagship store in downtown Columbus, a second location in Cincinnati, and an online platform serving customers across the country. But this wasn't just about business success anymore. My company had become a symbol of resilience for women who'd survived financial abuse, family betrayal, and the particular pain of being violated by people who claimed to love them. The wedding venue was decorated entirely with fabrics from my collections, rich burgundies and deep golds, patterns that spoke of strength recovered and beauty built from brokenness. Jonas waited at the altar in a suit that perfectly complemented my dress, his face bright with the kind of happiness that comes from love built on complete honesty. Dad walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. The guest list told the story of my rebuilt life. Leora stood as my maid of honor, Aunt Seraphine, beamed from the front row, and the seats were filled with customers who'd become friends, business partners who'd become family, and employees who'd helped me build something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. During the reception, I announced the establishment of the Maribel Crane Foundation, a scholarship fund for women pursuing entrepreneurship after experiencing financial hardship or family abuse. The applause was thunderous, but what moved me most was seeing Sarah, my first employee, crying with joy. She'd been one of the first recipients, using the grant to finish her business degree while working for me. Success means nothing if you don't use it to help others heal, I told the crowd. Every woman deserves the chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. Our honeymoon in Paris included meetings with international suppliers and potential partners for European expansion. But my vision had grown beyond fashion. I wanted to inspire a global movement of women who refused to let betrayal define them, who chose to build something beautiful from their pain. The business now employed 15 people, creating real economic opportunity in our community. Our annual revenue had crossed $500,000, symbolically surpassing the amount that had been stolen from me. Jonas had become a partner at his law firm, specializing in helping fraud victims recover assets and rebuild their lives. Gloria Neris, now 82 and still sharp as ever, had become our unofficial brand ambassador. She loved telling customers about my journey. I witnessed this woman's transformation from complete destruction to absolute triumph. She built an empire from the ashes of the worst betrayal imaginable. That's the kind of strength that changes the world. On our wedding night, as Jonas slept beside me, I wrote in my journal by lamplight, something I'd started doing during the darkest days after the trial. Christmas dinner 2022 destroyed the family I thought I had, but it revealed the family I actually deserved. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst betrayals. I lost people who shared my blood, but gained people who share my values. I lost money that was given to me, but built wealth that belongs entirely to me. I lost naive trust, but gained wisdom and the ability to love more carefully and more deeply. The monthly restitution payments still arrived, usually late. Kendra and Mom were both struggling, working multiple jobs to meet their obligations. Part of me felt sorry for them, but I'd learned that feeling sorry for someone doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. The business continued growing. We'd launched a line specifically for professional women rebuilding after divorce or financial abuse. Strong shoulders, confident cuts, colors that commanded respect. The tagline was built to rise, and it resonated with customers who understood that clothing could be armor as much as art. I'd also started speaking at conferences about financial abuse within families, sharing my story to help other women recognize the warning signs and understand their legal options. Jonas often joined me, explaining the legal remedies available to victims of identity theft and fraud. As I looked around our bedroom, filled with sketches for new designs and plans for international expansion, I realized that the woman who'd sat at that Christmas dinner table 3 years ago could never have imagined this life. That woman had been trusting to the point of naivety, dependent on family approval, afraid to take real risks. This woman knew her own strength. This woman had built something that couldn't be stolen, earned trust that couldn't be broken, created a family that couldn't betray her because it was founded on honesty and choice rather than obligation and blood. The journey from that Christmas dinner to this wedding night had been the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it had also been the making of me. I'd learned that sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want to discover everything you actually need. My story isn't unique, sadly. Financial abuse within families is more common than most people realize, and the betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's crime ever could. But my story is also proof that you can survive it, prosecute it, and build something beautiful from the wreckage. If you've faced betrayal from someone closest to you, know that you're stronger than you think. Document everything, seek legal help, and remember that protecting yourself isn't cruel, it's necessary. Your healing doesn't require their forgiveness, and your success doesn't need their approval. Have you faced betrayal from someone closest to you? Share in the comments. Your story could inspire someone else to rebuild stronger than before. I stood in front of the tall mirror in a quiet bridal suite, smoothing down the silk folds of the wedding dress I had stitched with my own hands. 3 years had passed since that Christmas dinner when my world had collapsed, and now I was staring at a version of myself I could hardly recognize. The girl who had once shaken with fear at her father's words was gone. In her place stood a woman who had rebuilt everything from the ashes. The boutique I once dreamed of had become a reality far greater than I ever imagined. Maribel Originals now had a flagship store in downtown Columbus, a second shop in Cleveland, and an online platform that shipped to every corner of the country. What began as sketches on a kitchen table had grown into a brand known for resilience and integrity. Every piece carried a story, and women who had survived their own betrayals wore them as armor. The room was alive with muted excitement. Leora, my best friend, leaned against the doorframe with a wide grin. She wore a pale lavender gown and held my bouquet steady and patient, the same way she had stood by me through the worst nights. Aunt Seraphine fussed with my veil until it lay perfectly, her hands trembling with joy. My father Clive peeked in wearing a crisp suit. His eyes watered the second he saw me, and he shook his head as if to steady himself. "You look like your mother on our wedding day," he whispered, but stronger. I smiled, touched his arm, and let the weight of the moment settle deep in my chest. The venue smelled faintly of roses and fresh fabric because the decorations were mine. I had filled the hall with draped linens I designed, soft ivory and champagne hues cascading from the ceiling, catching the glow of fairy lights. When I stepped out, the murmur of the crowd hushed. My father took my arm, and for the first time in years, I felt the safety of his steady presence beside me. At the altar, Jonas waited. He looked nervous and impossibly proud, his dark hair slightly tousled, his tie perfectly knotted. He had been my anchor, my legal advocate, my partner in life and love. When our eyes met, the years of struggle and rebuilding compressed into a single heartbeat. I felt no fear walking down that aisle, only gratitude. The vows blurred in my memory carried on a tide of emotion. Jonas promised to stand with me no matter how storms came, and I promised to keep choosing us every day. My voice trembled, but when I slipped the ring on his finger, the past no longer held me. It had transformed into a foundation beneath my feet. The reception burst with life. Music pulsed, glasses clinked, and guests filled the hall with laughter. Instead of a traditional dance, I presented a fashion show. Models, many of them local women I had hired and mentored, walked confidently in my newest line. Each garment carried hidden stitching embroidered with words of strength, courage, truth, renewal. I stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand. My heart pounded, but not with fear, with conviction. "Tonight is more than a wedding," I told the crowd. "It is proof that pain can become a purpose. I am proud to announce a scholarship fund dedicated to women who dream of starting businesses after facing financial hardship. Success means nothing if we do not help others heal." Applause erupted. I saw tears shining in the eyes of strangers who had once been customers and had since become friends. Leora squeezed my hand. Aunt Seraphine beamed like a spotlight. My father raised his glass, his pride etched in every line of his face. The night passed in waves of joy. Guests dined, danced, and shared stories of their own journeys. Gloria Neris, my old neighbor who had witnessed everything from the beginning, leaned over during dessert and said, "I saw your life shatter, and now I see the empire you built from those broken pieces. That is the story people will never forget." Later, Jonas and I slipped away, walking hand in hand through the city streets. Columbus felt different at night, alive and humming with possibility. He talked about our honeymoon plans, the meetings we had scheduled in Paris with international suppliers. Expansion was no longer a dream, it was our next step. My company now employed 15 people, each one part of the family I had chosen. Together we created jobs, supported households, and gave back to a community that had lifted me when I had nothing left. Annual revenue had surpassed $500,000. The irony was not lost on me. The very amount once stolen from me had been reclaimed and surpassed through honest work. Back in our suite that evening, the dress draped across a chair and the bouquet lying beside it, I sat with a journal on my lap. My hands hesitated over the page, then the words poured out. Christmas dinner 2022 destroyed the family I thought I had, but it revealed the family I actually deserved. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst betrayals. I closed the book, letting the ink dry as the sounds of laughter drifted faintly through the window. The chapter of pain was finished, but the story of building a legacy had only just begun. Have you faced betrayal from someone closest to you? Share your story in the comments. Your voice might inspire someone else to rebuild stronger than before. A year after the wedding, I stood in front of the glass storefront of our newest boutique in Indianapolis. The gold lettering of Maribel Originals gleamed in the afternoon sun, and through the window I could see racks of carefully arranged dresses, each piece carrying the same promise I had made to myself 3 years ago, that no betrayal would define me. Inside, customers browsed and laughed, women of all ages trying on clothes that made them feel bold and unafraid. Jonas had become a partner at his law firm and spent much of his time helping victims of fraud rebuild their lives. I often joined him at community events, sharing my story not as a cautionary tale but as proof of survival. Our scholarship fund had already supported 10 young women who were chasing their first business ideas. Watching them step onto paths of independence reminded me why every painful moment had been worth enduring. Kendra and my mother lived quietly on the outskirts of Dayton. Restitution payments still trickled in each month, but they mattered less than the boundaries I had set. I had learned to forgive without reopening the door, to wish them healing while protecting my own peace. On quiet nights, I still returned to my journal. My latest entry read, "The past no longer haunts me. It built me. What was taken has been restored 100 times over, not just in money, but in strength, in love, and in the family I chose." As I locked the new store and stepped into the crisp evening air, I realized that legacy was not only about success. It was about proving that even in the aftermath of betrayal, we can create lives rooted in integrity, resilience, and hope.